My name is Emma Walker, and 3 months ago, I lost everything. My job, my home, and him. Not to death. No, that would have been easier in some strange way. What I lost was something colder, something quieter, a slow, unraveling kind of disappearance. The kind that doesn't leave a funeral behind, just silence and voicemail echoes. I wasn't fired. I was phased out. I wasn't evicted. I chose to downsize, and I wasn't dumped. I was left. That's what people do when you start to fall apart and you don't bounce back fast enough. They leave. Except for Max. Max is my dog. My golden retriever, my constant, my 5 a.m. shadow and 11 p.m. shoulder to cry on. He's the only one who stayed. And this story, somehow, is not about the people who walked away from me. It's about the one who didn't. It started on a Tuesday. Rainy. Of course it was raining. I remember it because the mailman was wearing a neon poncho, and Max barked at it like it was a monster come to steal our last shred of peace. I laughed. Kind of. Then I opened the letter. It was from the last client I'd held on to. The one I thought would stick with me even after I quit my full-time job to freelance and follow my dreams. Termination of contract. Effective immediately. No explanation, no apology, just a signature. I sat on the couch and stared at the letter like it would change if I just kept looking. My vision blurred. I blinked hard, then harder, and then I cried. I didn't even try to stop it. It came, in waves. Ugly, ragged sobs. I sank into the couch cushions and pulled a blanket over my shoulders like it might shield me from the truth. I didn't say anything out loud, but Max came anyway. He always does. He trotted over from his bed in the corner of the living room, tail low, ears down, eyes fixed on mine with the kind of knowing you can't teach. He didn't try to jump on me or lick my face like he usually would. He just sat there and watched. At first, I couldn't take it. I turned away from him, embarrassed. It's one thing to fall apart in front of a therapist or a best friend. But a dog? That's the thing, though. He didn't judge me. He didn't turn away. He just waited. Eventually, I wiped my face and looked back at him. His eyes didn't waver. That's when it happened. He stood up slowly, walked over, and rested his head on my lap. And I lost it all over again, but differently. Not from pain, from relief, because somehow he knew. The next day, I didn't get out of bed until noon. Max didn't rush me. He lay beside the bed like a silent guardian. When I finally emerged, he greeted me with a slow wag of his tail, not a judgmental one, but patient. Loyal. We didn't do much. I didn't have energy for a walk. So I just sat on the floor, back against the wall, eyes blank. Max came to me again. This time he didn't just sit. He placed a paw on my leg. It wasn't dramatic, just one quiet, deliberate touch, and I couldn't hold it in. The grief, the shame, the loneliness. I burst into tears again, right there on the hardwood floor, my back against drywall, my heart against everything I thought I'd built. But he stayed. That was the second time he watched me cry. And again. He did this tiny, unforgettable thing. He leaned his entire body against mine, not pushing, not pawing, just leaning. Like he was saying, if you fall, I'll fall with you. Over the following week, I began to take small steps. The kind of steps people wouldn't notice from the outside. I got up before 10. I washed the dishes in the sink. I opened a window. I let the sunlight touch my face again. Max noticed. He began to follow me more closely. Not in a clingy way, but like a second heartbeat. I started talking to him, really talking. I told him about my worries, my failed relationships, my fear that maybe I wasn't actually resilient, that maybe I'd spent so long trying to prove I was okay that I forgot how to ask for help. He listened. Always. One night, as I lay on the floor beside him, because I couldn't sleep and my bed felt too big, he scooted closer and rested his head on my chest. I cried again. I didn't mean to. I thought I was done with tears. But something about that quiet, intentional closeness unlocked it all again. And when I cried that time, he licked my cheek once, then lay still. No barking, no whining, just him being there. And somehow that was the thing that changed everything. People say dogs don't understand emotion, that they just respond to behavior patterns, tone of voice, scent. Those people have never met Max. Because when I cried in the dark, he didn't leave. When I fell asleep in the hallway with the lights still on, he stayed curled up beside me. When I didn't eat for a day, he brought me his bowl, set it next to mine, and just sat there until I made something for both of us. He became my compass when everything else was noise. And slowly, quietly, I started coming back to myself. I know, this doesn't sound like a beginning, it sounds like a middle, or even an ending. But for me, it was the very start. The start of understanding what it means to be seen, not for what you do, or how much you make, or who you impress, but for who you are in the most unfiltered, tear-streaked, blanket-wrapped version of yourself. Max didn't just comfort me when I cried. He waited. He watched. And then, he did this. He taught me how to come home again. Not to a place. To myself. He waited at the door. Every time. I used to think silence was peace. Now I know it can be suffocating. After that day, the letter, the tears, the collapse, I didn't feel better. I didn't bounce back. Life didn't resume with a magical click. Healing didn't arrive in the mail with a tracking number. But Max waited. That's the thing. Every single morning, no matter how tightly I wrapped the blankets around my body, no matter how long I stayed in bed staring at the ceiling, Max waited by the front door, not whining, not barking, just sitting, waiting. He would turn his head slightly whenever I shifted under the covers. His ears perked up like he was hoping today would be the day I moved. The day I stepped outside again. At first, I didn't. For 4 days, I didn't even touch the doorknob. But he stayed. And then, on the 5th morning, I got up. Not with purpose, not with resolve, but because I was thirsty, and I couldn't take another day of my own breath bouncing off the walls. Max saw me move and trotted to my side immediately. His tail thumped once, then again, like hope on a metronome. Poured a glass of water. He sat by the door. I walked into the kitchen. He sat by the door. I glanced toward him, then looked away. Then, without knowing why, I whispered, "Okay." His tail wagged harder. I put on shoes I hadn't worn in weeks. My coat smelled like dust and something forgotten. Max didn't care. He stood up, walked to the door, and waited while I opened it. That first step outside was sharp. The cold air bit at my skin. The world felt too loud, the street too wide. But Max trotted ahead of me, turned back after 3 steps, and waited. That was our pattern now. I moved. He followed. He stopped. I caught up. He waited. Every time. We didn't go far that first day. Just to the corner and back. 10 minutes maybe. But when I stepped inside again and closed the door, I didn't feel like I was returning to a cave. I felt like I had touched something real. Max settled near the couch and curled up, content. He didn't need applause. He just needed me to try. And the next morning, he sat at the door again. We walked a little farther. 2 blocks, then 5. Then to the park. By the end of the second week, I was walking with coffee in hand. Max's leash looped casually around my wrist. I started greeting neighbors again. I watched sunlight flicker through trees. I noticed flowers blooming where I hadn't looked in years. And Max? He watched me. Not to lead, not to push, to walk with. One afternoon, we got caught in the rain. It started as a drizzle, soft, hesitant. I looked up, surprised. Max lifted his head, sniffed the air, and kept walking. I could have turned back, but something in me was tired of turning away. So we kept walking. Within minutes, we were soaked. My jeans clung to my legs. My hair dripped into my eyes. I started to laugh. Not a loud laugh. Not theatrical. Just real. It bubbled up like a breath I'd been holding for months. Max shook his fur and sneezed. I swear he looked at me like he was grinning. We found a small covered bus stop and ducked under it. I sat on the bench. Max sat beside my feet. We watched the rain together, and I cried again. But this time, not from grief, from the strange, humbling relief of being present. He watched me. He didn't lick my face, didn't whimper, just leaned into my leg gently. And I let him. I leaned back, and for once, I didn't feel like I had to hold it in. Later that night, I opened my journal. I hadn't written in it since everything fell apart. But now, words came. Today, I laughed in the rain. Underneath it, I drew a small paw print. And beside it, I wrote, "He waited at the door, every time, until I opened one inside myself. The healing begins. It didn't happen all at once. Healing crept in slowly, like light seeping through a half-closed curtain. You don't notice it until the shadows start to pull back, and suddenly you're not stumbling quite as often. That's how it was for me. And Max? He knew it before I did. He didn't change. He didn't need to. What changed was the way I saw him, not just as my dog or even my comfort, but as my mirror. He reflected who I was, every single day. And for the first time in a long time, I liked what I saw looking back. It started with a list. One morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a blue pen. Max was curled at my feet, warm and steady. I didn't plan what I wrote. I just let the pen move. Things I missed. Walking barefoot in the grass. Singing. In the car. Cooking for someone. Laughing until I cried. Painting, even if it's bad. Feeling proud of myself. Max lifted his head halfway through and pressed his chin onto my foot. I smiled. Then added, feeling loved by something that doesn't expect me to be perfect. I looked down at him and said, "That one's for you." He thumped his tail twice. It wasn't just the walks anymore. I started brushing him every morning. Long, steady strokes that quieted my thoughts. He loved it. Eyes half closed, leaning into the brush, letting the world fall away. It became a ritual, like coffee or teeth brushing, like peace. Then came the music. One afternoon, I turned on an old playlist I hadn't touched in over a year. Familiar melodies filled the room. Max lifted his head, then rested it again as I hummed along. And then, without warning, I started to dance. Barefoot, in the kitchen, just me. Max watched me for a second, then trotted over and spun in a goofy little circle. I laughed so hard I had to hold the counter. We looked ridiculous. We looked alive. Later that week, I tried painting again. The canvas was small. The brush bristles were stiff from disuse. My hand trembled a little, not from sadness, but from effort. Max lay beside me, watching every brushstroke. I painted him. Well, tried to. The nose was too big. and the eyes weren't quite right. But the expression, the quiet joy, that was him. When I finished, I held it up for him to see. "What do you think?" I asked. He tilted his head. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Me too." I pinned it to the fridge like a child's drawing. And every time I walked past it, I remembered, progress doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. One morning, I woke up before Max. That had never happened before. He was curled on the blanket near the foot of the bed, breathing softly. I sat up, stretched, and whispered, "Hey, sleepyhead." His eyes blinked open, confused for a moment, then calm. I kissed the top of his head and said, "Let's go somewhere new today." We drove 40 minutes out of the city. Just me, Max, and an old travel mug of tea. I didn't even tell anyone I was going. The trail was quiet, the forest still damp from the previous day's rain. Leaves crunched underfoot. Max trotted ahead, then doubled back, his tail a banner of excitement. At the halfway point, we found a clearing. Sunlight spilled onto the grass. I sat. He lay beside me. And for the first time in years, I felt still. Not numb. Not busy. Just still, I whispered into the air. "I'm okay." And I meant it. Max licked my hand once, then rested his head on my thigh. That's when I knew we weren't just surviving anymore. We were living. Together. That night, I wrote in my journal again. Today I felt the sun without wanting to hide. Healed? No. But healing? Definitely. And underneath, I drew another paw print. Just one. The day I smiled without thinking. It happened on a Thursday. A completely ordinary blue-skied Thursday. I'd gone into town to pick up groceries, something I hadn't done alone in months. Max stayed home, curled up in his spot by the front window, where he could watch me drive away like he always did. I remember turning the key in the ignition and glancing at him one last time. He lifted his head, ears perked, tail thumping twice, against the rug. That's when I felt it. Not dread. Not anxiety. Freedom. The world outside wasn't quite so sharp anymore. The roads didn't seem like escape routes. They felt like invitations. I rolled down the window and let the wind tangle my hair. The radio played something nostalgic, and, for the first time in a long time, I sang along. Not just a murmur. I sang like no one was listening. Because no one was. And it felt good. At the store, I caught myself humming. I picked out vegetables, fresh bread, cheese I hadn't bought in ages. I wasn't rushing, I wasn't hiding. I was moving through the world like I belonged in it again. And when I reached the checkout counter, the cashier smiled and said, "It's nice to see you again." I blinked. Then I smiled back. Without thinking. When I got home, Max was at the door. Waiting, like always. I knelt to greet him, my arms full of bags. "Guess what?" I whispered. "I think I'm starting to come back." He sniffed the bags, then leaned into me. His way of saying, "I know. I saw it in your eyes before you did." I unpacked groceries while Max lay in the sunspot on the floor. It was his favorite place, the one that shifted across the kitchen as the hours passed. I watched him stretch his paws out and sigh, content, safe, and I realized something. He was healing too. Not from heartbreak or anxiety like me, but from the months he had spent waiting, from the quiet tension he had held, mirroring mine. Dogs do that, don't they? They take on what we can't hold alone. So I set down the last bag and joined him. Right there on the kitchen floor. We lay, in that sunspot, two warm bodies breathing in sync, eyes half closed. I closed my eyes and smiled again. Just a flicker, a real one. That afternoon, I brought out the garden gloves. The backyard had turned wild while I was inside myself. Overgrown grass, tangled flower beds, a forgotten swing dangling from the old oak. I hadn't touched it since the day he left. Back then, I thought I'd never plant anything again. But now I was ready. Max followed me into the yard. He sniffed the air, tail wagging. I started clearing weeds, trimming hedges, finding life beneath decay. Hours passed. The sun dipped low. Max lay under the swing set, watching me like always. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I grabbed the rope swing, I sat down, and I let myself sway. It creaked. The branches groaned. But I didn't stop. I let the breeze move me back and forth until I was smiling so wide it felt foreign. Max barked once, just once, as if to say, "There she is." I laughed. That sound. It startled the birds. That night, I didn't write in my journal. I didn't need to. I lived the entry. But if I had, it would have said this. Today I smiled without remembering how sad I used to be. Today I smiled like it was a reflex, not a recovery. He waited through every silence. And now, he's walking with me through the music. I scratched Max behind the ears before bed. "Thank you," I whispered. "You never left." He looked up at me, eyes soft, and then placed a paw gently on my lap. And that small, perfect moment was enough. Because that was the day I smiled, without thinking. He watched me cry, then he did this. I didn't expect the tears. It was just another Sunday morning. The kind where light filters through the curtains in gentle stripes, and the world feels slow and kind. I had a cup of tea in hand, a half-read book on the coffee table, and Max sprawled out on the rug like royalty. It should have been peaceful. But as I sat there, watching Max breathe, something cracked open inside me. Maybe it was the stillness. Maybe it was the sudden absence of noise in my head. Maybe it was the fact that, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't running from anything. I started crying. Soft at first. Then deeper. Not sobbing, but not just a tear or two either. The kind of crying that sneaks up on you like a memory. The kind that cleans something out. Max lifted his head. He didn't come rushing over. He didn't paw at me. He just watched. He watched me cry the way only he could. Without fear, without judgment, without flinching. And then he stood up. Slowly. With purpose. He walked over to the couch, hopped up beside me, and, so gently I barely felt it, rested his paw on my arm. That was it. That was the moment. The one I didn't know I needed. Because something about that touch, about that deliberate choice to say "I see you," undid the last knot in my chest, the one that had been hiding under all the others. And I finally exhaled all the way. Afterward, we sat together in silence. My cheek against his fur, his heartbeat steady under my palm. The apartment was warm, but he was warmer. The world was quiet, but he was quieter. And I thought, this is what grace feels like. Not big, not loud, not some lightning bolt moment. Just a dog, just a paw. Just a truth that doesn't need explaining. In the weeks that followed, everything shifted. Not drastically. Not with some cinematic soundtrack. But I started smiling more. For real. I picked up my work again. I called my mom and didn't fake the cheer in my voice. I went back to the dog park, not just for Max, but because I wanted to see the world again. Max made friends easily. Of course he did. And slowly, so did I. One afternoon, I met a woman named Lily. Her rescue pup, Charlie, was missing a leg but not an ounce of joy. She sat beside me on a bench while Max and Charlie chased leaves. She asked, "Is Max always that intuitive?" I laughed. He's more than intuitive. He saved me. And I meant it. That night, I opened my journal. The one I'd once been afraid to touch. I wrote. He watched me cry. He didn't rush in to fix it. He didn't run from it either. He let it be real. And then, he touched my arm like he knew what it cost me to break. He did this. He stayed. Sometimes I think about who I was before. The unraveling. Before Max became more than just a dog. And I wonder if that woman would even recognize me now. If she'd believe that healing isn't about erasing pain, but about carrying it differently, with softness, with pause beside you. Max is older now. He moves a little slower, but he still waits at the door, still curls beside me when the world is too loud, and every now and then, I still cry. But now, when I do, I don't hide it, because I know what he'll do. He'll watch. And then, he'll do exactly what he always does. He'll place his paw on my arm and remind me I'm not alone.